So do you ever feel like you're way out of your league? Like everyone else is way smarter than you, and it's only a matter of time before it catches up with you and everyone finds out how dumb you actually are. So there's actually a name for this, and it's called imposter syndrome. And there's a good chance that some of you watching this video have already experienced it, and an even better chance that most of you are gonna experience it at some point. So in this video, I'm gonna break down what it is and hopefully convince most of you that you're actually pretty smart and you belong right where you are. Let's go. Imposter syndrome is defined as the persistent inability to believe that one's own successes is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own effort or skills. So that pretty much sums up my first 2 years of college, right? I mean, even though I was passing most of my classes, barely, it still felt like I didn't really belong and everybody else was on some higher level than me, and it was only a matter of time before I was gonna have to switch majors. And I'm pretty sure there's a large majority of you who can relate to feeling this way, at least once or twice, right? So that's kind of why I wanted to make this video, was to help a lot of you who are suffering from imposter syndrome, and to hopefully help those of you who haven't started school yet to avoid feeling this way altogether. So let's get started by answering the question, why is imposter syndrome so bad? Well, besides, it causing you to feel a little bit insecure, the main reason why imposter syndrome is dangerous is it can lead to you expecting less of yourself, which is exactly what happened to me during my first 2 years in engineering. I felt so far out of my league that I began to expect low grades. Like my potential, right? My ceiling was not as high as my classmates, right? So when I would get a low exam score, a low grade on something, I wasn't surprised, right? Because my A became a B minus. So it then turned into a bit of a self-fulfilling cycle, right? I would feel like an imposter, I would feel inadequate, so then I would expect to perform poorly, and then I would perform poorly, which would make me feel even more inadequate, and around we go. So the good news is that I eventually broke out of that cycle, and I'll go more into how I did it later in the video, but the point is that imposter syndrome is not some kind of harmless thing, right? It has the potential to really impact your performance in a pretty negative way. So that brings us to the next question, right? How can you get rid of or prevent imposter syndrome altogether? Well, it turns out that most of it comes down to what's going on in your head, right? Your mindset. Let's get into it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to recognize and acknowledge how you're feeling, right? Acknowledge what's going on inside your head. So instead of kind of letting your thoughts and your feelings take you wherever they want to go, the trick is to step outside of that and kind of observe what your mind is doing. So recognizing and acknowledging, your imposter thoughts and feelings is actually the first step to disempowering them. So, just by unbuckling yourself from the roller coaster of thought and emotion that we're all kind of on every day, and just being able to observe it can really go a long way. It's actually the first step to you realizing, that your thoughts and feelings don't define you. Because a lot of this stuff is just your brain wanting to retrace habits that you already have established, right? Because your brain likes doing the same thing, right? So if you already have a thought pattern that's established, right, of being an imposter, then your brain's gonna wanna retrace that and go down that spiral anytime there's an opportunity. So again, step one is waking up and recognizing what's going on. Okay, so the next step is to actively challenge any unproductive or negative thoughts right when you have them. So I think most people think that our thoughts are us, right? They represent who we are. And this is just not true, right? Your thoughts do not define you, okay? A thought is just a thought, right? It only becomes more when you put your attention and your energy behind it to the point where it starts to affect your actions. So again, it's important to realize that just because you have a thought or a feeling doesn't mean you have to follow that thought or feeling wherever it wants to take you. So it's going to be up to you to kind of distinguish between what thoughts, should be taken seriously and are productive, and which ones should be ignored altogether. Because our brains can generate some pretty random and crazy stuff, right? Some of it is positive, creative, and super productive, right? But some of it is pretty unproductive and quite dark, right? That's the category that imposter syndrome goes in. So it'll be up to you to decide which thoughts and feelings are the ones that you want to put your energy behind. So one of the best ways to disempower those negative and imposter thoughts when you have them is to quickly challenge it with, a logical and opposing thought. So if you start thinking that you are way out of your league, right, you could challenge that with thoughts like, I was accepted in this school just like everybody else. Or, this was never supposed to be easy, or, the struggle and being uncomfortable is an essential ingredient to growth, or just because I'm struggling now doesn't mean I'm incapable of improvement. Okay, so that brings us to the third step, which is to transition from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. Okay, so what is a fixed mindset? Well, it's a mindset where you believe that your abilities and your talents are fixed and innate and cannot be changed. So having a fixed mindset will feed your imposter syndrome, right? Because it sets a limit to your potential and does not allow for improvement or progress. Which is why it is crucial that you transition away from a fixed mindset and towards a growth mindset, which is one that acknowledges your ability to learn and improve and then acts on it. A growth mindset is focused on progress, improvement, and accepting feedback. A growth mindset accepts failure and struggle as a part of the process, and most importantly, a growth mindset is not focused on your current performance level and how it stacks up against your peers. So by adopting a growth mindset and acting on it, you're basically punching your ticket out of your imposter syndrome because you're going to be focusing on the things that move you forward. Things like improving your study habits, asking questions in class, meeting with your professors and accepting their feedback, and spending more time reading and absorbing your textbooks. These are the things that are going to start to close any gap that exists in your performance and therefore disempower your imposter syndrome. And if you want to know more about how a growth mindset actually works, right, how you get smarter and more mentally capable, it's all made possible by a wonderful thing called neuroplasticity. And I actually made a longer video about it. I'll put a link for that in the description. Okay, so next I want to go over exactly how I got over my case of imposter syndrome. Okay, so as I already mentioned, I dealt with my own pretty serious case of imposter syndrome during my first 2 years of engineering school. I was barely passing my classes and I had failed and had to retake several courses at this point. Okay, so it was the summer after my sophomore year and I actually had to retake Thermodynamics 1. And at this point, I had to go for broke, right? I knew that if I didn't start expecting more of myself and figure out how to perform better, there was a really good chance I wasn't going to survive another semester. So basically I decided to completely dedicate that entire summer to that one class, to thermodynamics, right? I totally adopted a growth mindset and I wanted to be able to say, by the end of that summer, I wanted to be able to say that I honestly could not have tried harder in that one class. And I made a lot of changes over that summer, but what it really boils down to is I completely overhauled how I studied and prepared for exams, right? I met with my professor multiple times per week to get all the questions I had answered, and I would spend days and days and days reading and absorbing my textbooks. And it worked. I got an A- in the course. And that A- was the cure for me. I no longer felt like an imposter, right? I felt like I belonged because now I had the results to prove it. So my GPA prior to that summer was a C+ average. And then after that summer, it increased to an A- average and I never failed a course again. I had proven to myself that I was capable, right? And that's all I needed. It enabled me to shift my mindset towards expecting more of myself. And that really no longer gave me an excuse to perform poorly. So my suggestion to you would be to call on every ounce of self-discipline you have and to point it squarely at your studies. Prove to yourself that you can improve and perform well, and once you do, your imposter syndrome will have no ground to stand on. Hey, I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you are, make sure you hit that like button and share it with your friends. I really appreciate it because that kind of stuff really helps the channel continue to grow. And if you want to know more about how I overcame my own imposter syndrome and increased my GPA from a 2.0 all the way up to a 4.0, be sure to check out my book. This book is the comprehensive guide for anybody to get any degree they want. Time management, stress management, mindset, discipline, sustainable lifestyle, studying performance, and of course, exam performance. It's all in here. It's getting a ton of great reviews and it's helping out thousands of students all over the world. And actually recently made the bestseller list in several categories on Amazon. So if you're struggling or you're a new student, I guarantee this book will help you. It's available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. I'll put links in the description for everything. Thanks for the support and back to the video. So the next thing I would say is to set yourself up for success, right? Do not overload your schedule. The last thing you want to do, especially if you're trying to prove to yourself that you can improve and succeed, is to take on more than you can handle, right? You want to set your lifestyle up, set your life and your schedule up so that it's challenging, but not unsustainable. The course load and workload that you take on should be directly proportional to your current ability level, right? And then as you grow and improve, remember, growth mindset over fixed mindset, you can take on more and more. You know, because probably one of the worst things that you can do if you have imposter syndrome is to take on more than you can handle, right? And I've actually done a longer video on just this exact topic, sustainability. I'll link it in the description. So the next thing I want you to do is to remind yourself that everyone has a different starting point. So we tend to think that everyone coming into college, right, is all kind of at the same level, at the same starting point. You know, we're all freshmen, so that means we must all have the same or similar experience and skill level. Nothing could be further from the truth. Let me explain. So I want you to imagine a starting line. In a perfect world, everybody would start at the same point with the same skills and same experience. But the reality looks more like this, right? A full spectrum of skills and experience coming in freshman year. So some students are going to start way ahead of the pack, right? And there are several reasons for this. Maybe they went to much better schools, better education, right? Or their parents maybe placed much more importance on the development of math and engineering skills. Or maybe they're international students, you know. It's a really good bet that every international student coming into the US is going to have a much more solid base and education in math and science. That's just the truth. So that's one end of the spectrum, right? But then you got the kids on the other end of the spectrum that kind of start way behind the pack for the same reasons, right? Maybe they had a lower quality of grade school education, one that didn't really place very much emphasis on math and engineering, or maybe they had an upbringing that didn't push the development of math and engineering skills. You know, so if you're feeling kind of way out of your league and you kind of have some imposter syndrome feelings going on, just remind yourself that there is a huge spectrum of skill level and experience that comes into college, right? And you're going to fall somewhere on that spectrum with everybody else. And if you're like me, you're probably going to have quite a bit of making up to do, and that's totally fine. But it does not mean that you don't belong. So don't make the mistake of thinking that every freshman, you know, starts with the same experience, education, and upbringing. Because, you know, it may feel like a large majority of them are smarter than you and better than you, but in reality, the truth is they probably just got a little bit of a head start. Okay, and the last thing I want to say is to remember that you're not alone. According to this 2019 study, 20% of students experience imposter syndrome while they're in school, and another 82% of people experience imposter syndrome at some point in life. So you can take a little bit of comfort in that, right? In knowing that there's a really good chance that several other students around you are having the same feelings you're having. And the last point I want to make on this is a quote from Steve Jobs.
Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact, and that is everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you.
But that's it for now, so I hope you found that helpful, and be sure to check back for more engineering tips, advice, experience, and education. But thanks for watching, and until next time, keep up the good work.